Well, good morning, everybody. The first thing I'd like to say that I'm very pleased that a regulator has been invited here to explain a little bit what are the challenges we are facing nowadays. And I want to take this opportunity after the first speech to explain what is the role of regulators in the European energy system, something which is not always well understood by all the stakeholders. The first point is that I think that the role of regulators is to try to make individual and collective interests fit. I think it's a very important element to have in mind as far as these reflections on IT systems and data management are at stake. And I will develop a little bit this aspect to highlight, to explain what is the current reflection we are developing in France, in the French Regulatory Commission, inviting many stakeholders, many people around the table, and carrying out a study in order to investigate the different kinds of models we could develop for data management in France. In terms of IT systems, the first thing to say is that as regulators, we are there to make the market live, the market exist, and without highly developed ITs, the single market for electricity and gas would not exist, probably. I mean, IT development has been key in terms of third-party access to infrastructures, for example. And if we look at the latest developments under the third legislative package, to say, development of the flow-based, for example, is an excellent illustration of where the networks and data management can meet efficiently. So, I don't know, well, anyway, no need for slides. What I want to say is that beyond these innovations, these initiatives, okay, thank you. It's clear that we are now living a new revolution, a technological revolution, and which was well highlighted in the first speech, because indeed, 2 years ago, the concept of energy digitalization was probably not as relevant as it is today. And of course, in the seat of a regulator, it takes some time to really understand what are the stakes, the challenges ahead, and what the benefits we can get from these evolutions are in the mid to long term. So the focus on this technological challenge, of course, concerns several different aspects. Clearly, as far as transmission and distribution are concerned, network and infrastructure management are clearly an area where we can expect some interesting improvements. Also, we can get a lot from quality of supply monitoring. Energy production and storage have to fit together, and clearly having a smart management of systems is necessary here. And we have all this development of smart metering, which, if we look at an integrated view to the value chains, seem that we are in front of potential, big potential synergies and efficiency improvements. So the regulation now has to accompany that, this change. We have, on the one hand, to make opportunities happen, but at the same time to be aware of risks and provide the relevant protections. So I'd say that, to summarize it in a sentence, the regulator's objective nowadays is to try to turn data management into a tool which would serve efficiency, the efficiency of energy systems. Okay. Oh, it's fine. Okay. No, the focus in this perspective, the focus of regulators is on the way we coordinate people in this area. So that's why our focus has been on governance mainly. And, for example, what would be the rule for platforms allowing to share information, to share data, and how to organize the collection of data and then the proper use of them. Of course, the focus of regulators is on infrastructure operators, which have the merit to be at the heart of the system, managing it, of course, but also being an interface with all the stakeholders, producers, also interconnections on the TSO side, and a direct relationship with consumers on the DSO side. But it's important to clarify the responsibilities. Here, the purpose is not to say who should do what, but to include in the functioning of the system something which would be understandable to stakeholders in order to be secured on how these data are going to be used and what will be made of them. Because you know that, especially in France, some consumers are quite concerned about their individual data and what will be done by them. So we need to reassure people about the potential opportunities and the benefits they could get from that. We have then, let's say, 3 important background principles in our approach. The first one is multi-energy. We see here in this development around the data management a unique occasion to have gas and electricity work together and even beyond. And one of the purposes there is to get synergies beyond the energy sector. The second point is something in France where we are really very interested in, and it's a key priority, is to ensure an equity of treatment of citizens, and especially to ensure that people living in rural areas will get the same benefits as the ones in big cities. And third point, of course, leaving opportunities open, not to lock the system, to allow the innovation to happen. So we looked in the CREU investigations, 2 different models developed nowadays in Europe. And what is very interesting is that we saw the role of the local habits, let's say, local culture, and also the influence of specificities, national specificities. So we have seen different models developing, not saying that one is better than others, but there is a combination of, let's say, more TSO-led, DSO-led, centralized, decentralized. Of course, when you get a high number of operators, often you will get something more decentralized. In France, I'd say that we have a tradition of centralization, and which is reflected in the organization of the system, with 1 TSO for electricity, 2 for gas, and let's say 1 dominant DSO for both electricity and gas. So which means that the idea of centralization may be easier to develop than in other countries. We have investigated, let's say, 4 different models. I will not go into too many details, but with, on the one hand, distributors as aggregators, TSOs as aggregators, a decentralized approach which would be based more on local authorities developing their own systems, and autonomous entity as an aggregator, which would be more, let's say, a single design for decentralized options. So all these options have their pros and cons, clearly. The TSO-led organization is probably more efficient in terms of centralization and standardization. If one looks at distributors, here clearly the interface with consumers and the proximity with the downstream markets is an advantage. Decentralized platforms here allow to better fit with local concerns and articulation of different kinds of public services, including, for example, local transportation. So, a brief look at the situation in France. What we have seen is that we have had several initiatives developing, mainly starting from big cities. Here, the first movers were clearly these big cities, identifying probably before the others all the potential and the need to innovate also for local considerations, to solve local problems, let's say, or find solutions to issues, specific issues. On the operator side, the infrastructure operator side, we've seen also different kinds of initiatives, with the gas and electricity TSOs developing an open data crossing multi-energy consumption balance sheets. And on the DSO side, here which is on this slide, the initiative of a digital service agency, where here you see the translation of three big objectives, with on the one hand, on the first, facilitating and increasing the fluidity of markets, so which is the competition-oriented, allowing consumers to choose their suppliers, boosting innovation and creating growth, economic growth, meaning here, and also accompanying, as a third point, the energy transition and stakeholders involved in this process. So, debates are still open. So the issue now is, what look to the future should we develop? And here I would focus on three main recommendations, which are let's say, the spirit in which we are driving our own approach as a French regulator. The first point is to ensure consistency, quality, and interoperability of data. The fact that data is opened and can be used by a large number of people is absolutely key here. And here, of course, we invite all the different stakeholders to engage into a cooperation approach, the idea being to have everybody around the table then developing something in the benefit of the consumers in general. The second point, which is not contradicting the first one, is clarifying roles to in the end, have an efficient governance of the system in this multi-energy perspective I just mentioned. And to conclude, I'd say, it's been mentioned during the first speech, strengthen confidence to the benefit of innovation is, of course, a key objective. Here, the quality of the dialogue is absolutely fundamental. Transparency there and explaining the purpose of these developments is our priority. I will conclude on this. Thank you very much.